Everyone has probably wondered at some point in their lives what would happen to them if they were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. Everything from getting an X-ray to flying on a plane exposes us to some level of radiation. However, this video isn't about the trip to your doctor's office. Let's assume you visited the most radioactive places in the world. What would happen to your body as you saw increasingly dangerous levels of radiation? Number 1. How about we start with a classic? Everyone loves Chernobyl, so let's assume you visited Pripyat and found the most radioactive object there. If that thought gives you the willies, you might find yourself surprised. This unassuming looking claw is the most radioactive thing here, putting out a rather unimpressive 336 microsieverts an hour. While Chernobyl was incredibly radioactive at the time of its meltdown, the 35 years have really managed to dampen its impact. It would take you 18 hours to equal the dose an average American receives in a year, around 6.2 millisieverts. It would actually take you over 8 months of snuggling the claw to reach a dose that would cause acute radiation sickness, at about 1 to 2,000 millisieverts. Though it seems this old nightmare has lost most of its bite, you won't be disappointed by the other places in our countdown. Number 2. The next place on our list is the Kazakhstan polygon, and unlike our last contender, it can at least still live up to its ominous reputation. The Soviet Union had detonated 456 nukes in this remote and desolate region of Kazakhstan. Let's assume you are one of the people living on the edge of this grim and barren place. You volunteer to be tested for radiation, and the scientists find that you were exposed to doses between 500 and 2,000 millisieverts. Now, we're getting somewhere. It turns out that the Soviets had tried to hide the fact that 658 people had been hospitalized with acute radiation sickness from the fallout. Symptoms of the milder forms of this can include skin irritation, nausea, vomiting, and damage to reproductive and blood cells. Someone you know might have died from cancer or given birth to children suffering from congenital malformations. Studies have shown an increase in these defects and a 3-fold increase in infant mortality. Later studies show that cancer mortality rates had quadrupled and leukemia risk had doubled. If this sounds bad enough, it's nothing compared to the things that can happen at our next location. Number 3. You can't talk about radiation without talking about Hiroshima. It's no surprise that this would make it into our top 5 most radioactive places in the world. Let's assume you were one of the people who endured this blast. What would you have experienced? With the help of Japanese scientists, a Brazilian professor had measured the amount of radiation in a human jawbone found at the site. They found that this person had been exposed to a whopping 9.46 sieverts. That is over 1,500 times the average dose of radiation an American will receive in a year. Assuming you managed to survive the initial blast, this dosage would be almost guaranteed to kill you, even with medical care. In just a few minutes, your skin would burn and you would suffer from severe nausea and vomiting. Within a couple hours, you would be crippled with severe diarrhea. You would suffer from high fevers and your blood cells would have been decimated. You would be dizzy and disoriented as your body systematically falls apart, and within a few days to a couple weeks, you would die. By now, you might be wondering how it could possibly get worse. Luckily for you, we have 2 more examples that will answer that question. Number 4. No one would blame you if you haven't heard of the Cecil Kelly criticality accident. Only 10 of these types of events have occurred outside of a nuclear reactor. Let's assume you are Cecil Kelly, a 38-year-old chemical operator working at Los Alamos National Laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico. You are part of a team that manages a massive 264-gallon tank used to reclaim residual plutonium from previous experiments. An error has occurred during 2 different transfers of material and resulted in this tank containing 200 times more plutonium than it should. When you switch on the mixer, the solution goes critical and kicks off a spontaneous chain reaction of nuclear fission, bombarding you with an intense beam of neutrons and gamma radiation. There's a bright flash of blue light and a resounding thud, and you are thrown to the ground. You get up, confused, and switch the mixer off, then on again, before running from the building. At first, it wasn't clear what had happened. The other technicians find you lying in the snow, unable to coordinate your muscles and only saying, "I'm burning up, I'm burning up." Though you are rushed to the emergency room, the damage is already done. For the first hour and 40 minutes following the accident, You are incoherent and racked with bouts of severe vomiting and retching. They finally get you stabilized and draw blood, and what they discover seals your inevitable doom. A dose of 2 Syriacs would make you very ill, but you would probably survive. A dose of 5 Syriacs would have been sufficient to all, but guarantee you a slow demise. Unfortunately, you endured a dose of 36 Syriacs, over 7 times a guaranteed lethal dose. All that the doctors could offer you is medication to ease your suffering. You would endure severe pain, nausea, vomiting, fever, and diarrhea within the first few hours. This would progress to severe neurological dysfunction, including seizures, tremors, agitation, ataxia, and lethargy. Just 6 hours after the incident, all of your white blood cells would be destroyed. After 24 hours, the doctors would perform a bone biopsy and recover bone marrow that was thin and devoid of any red blood cells. Just 35 hours after the incident, your body would shut down and you would go into irreversible cardiac arrest. As grim as this story is, the radiation here inevitably dispersed and is no longer capable of killing someone in seconds. A bit of bad luck was all it took to turn a normal day into a nightmare, but research still continues there to this day. No one in their right mind would go to the last place on our countdown. Number 5. After everything you've seen, you probably might be wondering how this could possibly get worse. Isn't a 35 Syriacs enough? After all, it could kill a man 7 times over. Why not stop here? Unfortunately for you, that would be no fun. Let's assume you could be teleported inside the most radioactive container in the Fukushima reactor in Japan. You would look at your surroundings and find yourself inside of a pressure vessel that once held nuclear fuel deep within one of the reactor's containment units. You would notice that the fuel had melted its way out of the pressure vessel and spilled out onto the floor of the containment unit. When TEPCO tried to measure the radiation levels within this vessel in 2017, they had to abort their operation. The remote vehicle could not get through the grating to examine the space, but the data they managed to get estimated the level of radiation within this space to be 530 Syriacs per hour. Though it would take you 4 minutes to reach the dose that killed poor Cecile Kelly, unlike him, it wouldn't stop there for you. Every minute that passes would increase your dosage by another 8.8 Syriacs, a dose that would plenty lethal on its own, but compiled together would lead to an excruciating and slow demise. You would have just enough time to regret your choices before your skin would begin to burn and you would start vomiting. The pain would only increase as your digestive system desperately tries to purge itself of the stuff. You wouldn't have any time to think about how disgusting of a way to die this is, because the radiation would be making quick work of your brains and nerves. You'd become confused and uncoordinated. You might try to escape only to find your body no longer responding. Your skin would blister and burn away. You might think to yourself that this is what it would be like to be slowly microwaved. Your vitals would collapse, all of your blood cells would be decimated, and you would go into shock. The pain would recede, you would begin to feel cold and numb. It wouldn't even take the whole hour for you to lose consciousness and pass away. Your last few minutes of life would be of suffering and confusion. Fortunately for you, no one will ever actually have to experience this fate. After all, this is the most radioactive and unreachable place in the heart of the Fukushima reactor. The further you get, the less radiation there is, and much like Pripyat, it too will decay. That's all for today. If you guys enjoyed this video and would like to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you for watching and make sure you keep an eye out for our next video.